Welcome adventurers to another build video. Today we are going to build out a Barbarian, and even though I usually focus almost strictly on damage output as a Barbarian, I'm going to focus a little bit more this time on overall survivability and tankiness in combat in addition to some of that damage output. The thought is that sometimes the Barbarian in your party ends up needing a lot of the team's resources in order to keep going. They have that armor class penalty while raging. Yes, they do get temporary hit points, but they often are upfront with a slightly lowered armor class, so they end up taking a lot of hits. Doesn't mean they necessarily go down because they've got those temp hit points and a big hit point pool to begin with, but it does mean they often need a lot of resources to be healed back up to full so that they can survive the next fight. I'm kind of thinking with this build, what if you were in a slightly smaller party, and in that smaller party, you didn't necessarily have a cleric or someone who could just keep pumping out heal spells, or an alchemist who could keep making elixirs, and you need everyone to just be a little bit more even-tempered throughout. That's what this build is going to be for. Let's dive in. We are going to stay as a human because we're going to get some extra training and feats out of that. For the background, we are going to go with the Nomad. This is going to play into the theme of this build. And the class is, of course, going to be Barbarian. All right, let's go ahead and set our abilities. We are going to do Strength and Constitution as much as we can. Strength, Constitution, Strength, Constitution. Class boost is Strength, and then we're going to boost Strength and Constitution again. We are also going to boost our Wisdom, because this is going to be kind of a nature-y Barbarian, and then Dexterity, because we will need that a little bit for some of our armor class. There we go. Now for the Heritage. We are going to pick the Versatile Heritage so that we can pick up a feat. This is where we are going to really start deviating from kind of your typical Barbarian. We're going to use Shield Block. This is going to be a Barbarian with a shield. You don't often see that because the Barbarian, again, is focused on overall damage output. That often means a two-handed weapon and that a shield is not available to you. To get around that, we are going to be an Animal Instinct Barbarian. Specifically, we are going to be a deer. Deer have antlers. Now, I would assume that would mean that those are on your head. That is what you are using for your attacks, which means both hands are actually still free. You can also see the antlers can grapple, and I believe at a later level they add reach to it, which I suppose I should look that up, but that would also be really handy. So now we have a slightly smaller weapon die than your typical two-handed D12 Barbarian weapon, but a D10 weapon that doesn't require the use of your hands does enable us to hold a shield for all of that extra protection. For our Ancestry feats, I think this could depend a little bit on what you want to do with your campaign. I often like to kind of see what other people are doing. Arcane Tattoos I really like for fighters, but it is terrible for Barbarians because these are cantrips, which means you can't be raging. I mean, it's not terrible. I guess you could choose to use some cantrips and then enter a state of rage, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to be boring, frankly. Go with Natural Ambition or Natural Skill, I think we want to do actually here, and pick up some additional skills. So we'll take care of the skills later. As far as the class feat, I'm not ever too excited about the sort of level 1 Barbarian feats, but I do think that a couple of these could be really suiting to the overall build. Remember, this is a deer, right? You're a deer Barbarian, so sudden charge could be really, really, fitting for this. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. But I would also say that adrenaline rush also kind of makes sense. But I would not go with raging thrower necessarily because you don't have good dexterity. I mean, you could go for it, but I'm going to go with sudden charge. There we go. Okay, now the simple thing here is we don't need to pick out any weapons. We already have them built in, and that is fantastic. As far as our defense goes, I am going to use some of the newer items. I believe these are actually from the treasure vault. So what we're going to do, wrong button there, kind of just fitting the theme, but also being mechanically beneficial to us. We're going to go with the lattice armor. It's kind of like chainmail, but it's not noisy, which you wouldn't want to be noisy to be a nomadic wanderer in the wilderness. That wouldn't make sense. That's why I like this. I also think, even though I think this is still made out of metal, it seems a little more organic and natural to me. So I think that is better for this particular build. Let's go with that. And then sort of similar notes, we're going to go with a hide shield for this character. I think, maybe you would want to do a steel shield or upgrade even more to like a tower or something. Actually, tower would be pretty cool for this build eventually because you could kind of imagine it as being like a two-handed tower shield user. But for now, we're going to go with with the hide shield for its 2 gold pieces because I don't think we can afford the tower shield and other things right now. That's kind of all you need for gear, which is really cool with this build. I mean, obviously we will go and add your standard sort of adventures pack because, you need rations and a place to sleep and all that stuff. So we'll do that, but you might not need to do much more. That's about it. Let's go ahead and round out our skills. It's not too incredibly important, but I am going to go with some society and acrobatics here because I am already trained in athletics from the class. I already have a lore, and then let's fill out the rest of the skills here. I think that nature and medicine makes sense for this outdoorsy, naturey sort of build. We have survival from the nomad background, which is also perfect. And then I kind of like religion too, because I'm just imagining this again being sort of outdoor woods, wandering, maybe slightly pilgrim-like. And we do have that +1 to wisdom, so let's go with religion. Why not? Skills, I think sometimes really, really matter for the build. And other times it's a little bit more of what does your party need. So for some of the things like survival and nature and your terrain lore, I think that is vital to this build. That's part of the character. Some of the others you could definitely change up as needed. So that pretty much does it for level 1. Let's talk about what this character can do at level 1, and then let's talk a little bit about later levels. I don't like to plan too far ahead with later levels, though I do like planning ahead a bit. I think that if you try to plan ahead too far, the realities of your party composition and of your campaign end up changing your plans quite a lot. You get into a situation where you realize your party is really lacking in something, and your character is best suited, both in their backstory and in their mechanics, to pick that thing up, even if it's not something you had considered when you were initially building the character. So for those reasons, I do like to wait a little bit before I build out the later levels, but I think it is important to think ahead a little bit, so that's what we're going to do in a minute. Anyway, kind of got sidetracked there. Let's talk about what this character can do at level 1, how you should roleplay, and sort of the mechanical advantages that this character has. So again, I think I've said this like 3 or 4 or maybe more times now. This is an outdoorsy, nomadic, wanderer, nature kind of character, though it is a barbarian. What I think of for this is, if you've ever seen video and hopefully not had to encounter in person, when a deer, especially a big buck, has a bad experience with humanity in some sort, whether that's like the sort of getting cornered somewhere or even like trapped in a store, and they just kind of go crazy and they smash everything to pieces. That's what this character is. You're going to use that shield block, raise a shield reaction, because you've got that hand free, because you're using antlers to stay alive in combat. You are going to use that rage capability of granting the temporary hit points with that extra constitution you have there. The +3 in con is quite a lot. So hopefully between that, the base 18 armor class, it will drop to 17 while you're raging, but oh well. You'll get it back up with the shield block, temp hit points. Hopefully that means you can absorb or avoid more blows than your typical barbarian and stay alive. You'll still do pretty decent damage with that D10 plus your 4 strength. You will lag behind. Oh, and then your, I think it's just +2 damage from your barbarian instinct. So you're not going to hit as hard as a giant instinct barbarian, but your armor class is going to be significantly better, and you'll be able to absorb some damage with the shield. So you are probably going to take half the damage that like a giant instinct barbarian would actually take. That's the point of this build. As you level up, let's talk about some of the things that you can do. I chose the sudden charge as the first level feat so that we can get bashing charge at the second. This has mechanical capabilities to it, but again, I'm sort of just thinking about that like deer trapped in a convenience store effect. You are running and bashing everything in sight. It's just really fun and really fitting for this character. In terms of the skill feat, remember, not only do you have a hand free, which is helpful, but you do have the grapple trait with your antlers. So we're going to go with Titan Wrestler. You are going to lean into that grapple, and then of course here, because you do have a hand free, you can also attempt a trip or a shove on an enemy larger than you with the Titan Wrestler feat. As you level up, again, this is where I think it starts kind of dropping off in terms of how much you can plan ahead. But I do kind of like, mostly for the flavor, the role play of this, going with like a quick jump or a maybe even better, a powerful leap, I would say. Is that what I was thinking? Quick jump. Yeah, quick jump. Because I think that is something that would let you, be a little bit more agile in combat, and it is something that is very appropriate to being a deer. If you've ever seen, they just kind of spring right up, right out of nowhere, and it's kind of astounding to watch what they can do. And I think that is about as far ahead as I want to go with this build for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you've played a character like this. Again, most barbarians are pretty much focused on damage over everything. This is a little bit more focused on, yes, damage, but more so survivability. This would be really good for a smaller or medium-sized party where you can't really afford to just keep handing out a bunch of consumables or medicine checks for that barbarian character over and over, especially because as they get up there, they have so many hit points that it takes multiple treat wounds, multiple consumables in order to get them back to full. Hopefully this character avoids that and is still fun to play and still hits really hard, as well as having decent movement and some jumping and bashing abilities along the way. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll do another build soon.